here to talk about my foray into reading Japanese detective fiction, mystery fiction, crime fiction, however you want to describe it, and what I've learned and where I may go next. Spoilers, this has been so fun, and I am so excited that I have another sort of tradition of crime fiction to explore more and enjoy. And I feel like through this process and doing some research and also reading 6 books, I have a better kind of sense of the kinds of Japanese crime fiction that I'm eager to dive into more. So yay. I should also just give a caveat right now that I'm an English speaker. I unfortunately do not speak Japanese, so I am kind of limited to the English translations that I have access to here in the US. So I'm sure that there are a ton of great books that I could read in the future that I will not be able to because they're not available in translation, but hopefully they will continue to be more and more available. So anyway, just a caveat there, somewhat limited in what I can read and assess. And also research was a little bit difficult on this because a lot of the research I was trying to do is not available in English. So I'm working with what I got in English is basically the caveat here. So I did read 6 books, but before I get into that, I want to share a little bit about what I have learned about this tradition of mystery. So I have put together, I process things when I have to re-share them. So let's start with a little bit of the history or the timeline. So in terms of how this area of mystery develops, keep in mind that the original sort of developments of the mystery genre as we know them today originate from the mid-1800s in, it depends on who you say wrote the first one, but Edgar Allan Poe, Wilkie Collins, let's call it like middle of the 1800s. And that is developing in the US and UK. So eventually that tradition makes its way to Japan as some things are either in translation or people who can read English start to consume that genre, and it starts to become popular. So the original kind of tradition is pre-World War II, but it really starts ramping up. Like, it seems like the kind of dude who helped make mystery fiction Japanese, like start making it distinctively something for Japan, is Edogawa Renpo. I guess it's meant, that's like his pen name, and it's meant to be sort of like a Japanese take on Edgar Allan Poe, which I thought is adorable and exactly how everybody should come up with pen names. So he starts really writing a lot in the 20s, and he develops what is called the unorthodox school. So it's sort of combining mystery whodunit from Western writers with a literary movement that was happening at the time in Japan that was focused on horror. I forget what it was called, but it's a few different items of like horror, eroticism, grotesqueness, and sort of violence, so gore maybe. It's combining those two elements together. So he kind of popularized that unorthodox school, and concurrently there's this other branch that's going alongside it that is a little bit more related to sort of the original mystery tradition from the golden age of detective fiction. Well, actually not even quite to that point yet, but sort of the more like Western, like logic puzzle side of things. So they're kind of going alongside each other, but Renpo is definitely like really a very important figure. He also founded the Mystery Writers of Japan, and I think that their major prize is named after him. So like he's a really, really big deal. So that continues. So he starts doing that in like the 20s, and then he continues up through about World War II, and then World War II is obviously a very cataclysmic event in Japanese society, and so he shifts more into promoting the Orthodox school, and also I think sort of like promoting the genre, studying it, establishing that society, etc. And from that comes the Orthodox school, which, like I said, is much more similar, I think, to what we have in the US and the UK in our mystery writing traditions, but obviously concerning themes that are more relevant to Japanese society, settings, character types, etc. So it's sort of like the Japanization I don't know if that's a word, of those tropes. So for instance, one thing that ends up becoming a really big part of the Japanese mystery tradition is the classic locked room mystery. I don't remember, I want to say it was like Seiji Shimada wrote this essay, but I'm not totally sure. Anyway, somebody basically said that John Dickson Carr, the American Golden Age writer, is some people consider to be the first Japanese mystery author because it basically the direction that Japanese mystery fiction takes is so influenced by his work and his love of a locked room mystery. So anyway, that's really a very strong trajectory with the Orthodox school. And then starting, I think the first one was in like 1957. So like, let's say through the 60s and 70s, there is a new kind of flavor of what's called the social school. There's a much stronger emphasis on kind of gritty realism and having ordinary people be involved in murders, etc. Like, I kind of am thinking the sort of, in the US, like the gritty social commentary of like 1970s independent films. That's kind of the vibe that I got from the way that that was described. So that becomes a flavor that's also very prevalent, and maybe even more prevalent than the sort of like intellectualized version of a puzzle mystery. But then in the 80s, with the Decagon house murders, it turns out, there is a new school that comes up, which is the New Orthodox School. And that is getting back to that sort of intellectual, rationalized puzzle mystery tradition that is represented in like John Dickson Carr and some of those early writers like Seishi Yokomizo. So kind of getting back to that tradition. And then on top of it though, there's this sort of like metatextual element or self-awareness in the text of murder mystery genre conventions. So, I mean, if you know anything about my taste in reading, you're like, oh, that is exactly what Mara likes, which is very true. So there's that. And then, so from there, that's kind of been the dominant school, but with the rise of like TV and movies and animation, incorporating more mysteries, that has been a really big influence in the last 40 years. There's also like some subgenres that come up. So there's one that we'll talk about that's called the ooh mystery, and it's because it's like really violent and gruesome and like, ugh, it just makes you say ooh out loud, which I thought was really funny. So yeah, there's like other trends that come up, and I think at this point there's a lot of like kind of experimentation, innovation, pulling from traditions within the Japanese murder mystery tradition, but also just Japanese literature in general, and also I think a lot of influence from Japanese horror. So maybe going back to some of that Idegawa, Rampo sort of like horror elements, I think that also becomes an influence. So anyway, I had a really fun time investigating some of that and trying to understand the timeline and also some of these major influences. Idegawa, Rampo is a really big figure and really influential. Understanding kind of where the Orthodox and New Orthodox schools are coming from. Definitely a big takeaway for me is the influence of John Dickson Carr on the development of the Japanese tradition in general, and also even to the point of not like a tradition of mystery novel that's not even really trying to mostly be a novel, but is more seen as an intellectual game between the reader and the author. That seemed to be a really strong theme. Actually, I was gonna read, I think that this is a really notable thing at the beginning of the Decagon house murders. There's sort of like an explicit critique in text of sort of like the more social school. Okay, here we go. Sorry, it took me a second to find it. One of the characters, and they all have named themselves after famous detectives in the Western canon. So that self-reflective element of this, the character's name's Ellery, says, in my opinion, mystery fiction is, at its core, a kind of intellectual puzzle, an exciting game of reasoning in the form of a novel, a game between the reader and the great detective, or the reader and the author. Nothing more or less than that. So enough gritty social realism, please. A female office worker is murdered in a one-bedroom apartment, and after wearing out the soles of his shoes through a painstaking investigation, the police detective finally arrests the victim's boss, who turns out to be her illicit lover. No more of that. No more of the corruption and secret dealings of the political world. No more tragedies brought forth by the stress of modern society and such like. What mystery novels need are, some might call me old-fashioned, a great detective, a mansion, a shady cast of residents, bloody murders, impossible crimes, and never before seen tricks played by the murderer. So that's sort of like, that feels like sort of the thesis of the New Orthodox school. And that'll segue into my opinions about what I've found. So if you know my reading taste, but at all, you know what that person just described is exactly what I want. So it's like, you know, the whole point of, for me at least, a huge part of what I come to a mystery for is not for realism. Like, in realism, police forces are inept. I forget what the stats are, but like a huge percentage of crimes that, unless they are solved within the first like week, are never solved. And usually the ones that are solved within the first week are ones that are like pretty obvious about who did it. So, you know, it's not like there's not really like great detectives. Like the number of really hard to solve cases out there are vanishingly small. That's not what I'm coming to a mystery thriller for though. I want the fantasy of, you know, cat and mouse, or an interesting thing that's not just, as the example this person gave, like somebody gets killed by their lover. Like I want something more interesting than that. So I think that what I really like about the New Orthodox approach to mystery thriller is that it's really leaning into essentially murder mystery as fantasy. And I think I'm somebody who tends towards that in my reading in general. I want books to give me a sense of verisimilitude so that I believe that it's set in our world, but I essentially think of all fiction as fantasy. For me, if I want to read something real, I'm going to go to nonfiction. I want the author to sell me on the particular fantasy of the genre that they're writing in. And what I like about the approach to the New Orthodox school is a self-awareness in the author of that being their job. So for me, what I've discovered in my reading is that I'm a New Orthodox school kind of girly, because if I was going to force rank the 6 books that I read, the 3 that I have the highest, are all from Pushkin Press. So like your girl's going to be watching Pushkin Vertigo. What is that? Is that what it's called? Pushkin Vertigo. I'm going to be watching that in print like a hawk to find more of what I like. Because it seems like that's really the main flavor of Japanese mystery that is really, really for me. So in terms of my experience, my 3 favorites were definitely Decagon House Murders by Yukido Ayatsuji, The Hojin Murders by Seiichi Yokomizo, and Murder in the Crooked House by Soji Shimada. So this one in general just was absolutely my favorite. I gave this 4.5 stars. This is my kind of, it's an isolated close circle mystery. It does have a locked room element to it, but I would say for me it reads more like an isolated close circle mystery than a locked room mystery, which I do enjoy a locked room mystery, but it's not my favorite. It's one of the kinds of mysteries I do enjoy. So for me, this was definitely my big hit. This is apparently the beginning of a series, and the next one in translation literally just came out, so I went ahead and pre-ordered that, so I will definitely be reading more of these as these come into translation in English. I also picked up the ones that are out for this series from Seiichi Yokomizo. This is from the 1930s, and it's clearly meant to be sort of a response to something like a Poirot. The main character, what is his? Kindaichi, he is sort of the opposite of Poirot though. He's like sort of a slovenly, young slob who's also just like great at solving mysteries. I would say that this one, the weakness in it is the character development, and I will say that in general for this kind of New Orthodox school book where the emphasis really is on the puzzle, there is a lack of character development, and that is like my critique, I would say, from what I've read so far, is that if you're wanting a fully rounded story where you are invested in the characters, which by the way I do think the Decagon House Murders has, much more so, at least to the extent I would expect in this kind of book, these do not have the character development I would hope, and that is what keeps them from being like favorites. So for me, The Hojin Murders, though, is a classic locked door mystery or locked room mystery, and I have gathered that this is considered to be like maybe the best one in Japan, or one of the very best ones. So yeah, I will definitely continue in the series, and I thought this had enough characterization that I gave it a 4-star and like I had something to hang my hat on. This one, the characterization I think was very off, and I do think it was too long, but it literally has like a lot of diagrams and stuff, so like he is clearly wanting you to try to see if you could figure this out. And this one is another isolation kind of vibe because it's set at the very tip of the northernmost island of Japan. I think it's called Cape Soya. And yeah, so it has that isolation vibe, which I liked, but I thought the characterization was the biggest miss here. But I would definitely read more from the author. I think I've already, I've got the Tokyo Zodiac Murders from him. I've already picked up a copy of that. So I'm gonna read something else from him. All 3 of these guys, I've already got more to read from them. And then for the bottom tier, I would say that each of these, there was just something a little, well, at least 2 of them, there was something just a little not quite to my personal preferences, which is why I didn't rate them higher. Aosawa Murders by Riko Onda. I think part of what's cool about this one is that each chapter is told from a different person's perspective, and it's sort of like a cold case or revisiting an infamous murder that is well known. It's basically everybody in the house except for I think the blind daughter and then a housekeeper who only took a sip and therefore didn't die. Everybody else dies from cyanide poisoning. And so there's an author who went back and did like interviews and stuff at the time to write a book, and we're getting a bunch of different perspectives. I think the writing in this is particularly nice. So if you're more of like a literary mystery kind of person, this is the one from what I read that I would probably recommend to you if you're looking for literary mystery, this is what I would point you towards. And I just think that there was, I think because something in the writing, I don't even totally know what it was that made this not fully click for me, but I gave this 3.5. It wasn't quite to my taste. It was probably a little too literary for my taste for a mystery thriller, but I thought it was really well done, and I can see why. Like, I think it won the Mystery Writers of Japan Award in the year that it came out. I can see why this was really well received because I think the actual writing is very, very nice. The Devotion of Suspect X by Kigo Higashino. So one thing I will say is, from what I can tell, Higashino is sort of like maybe the equivalent of like James Patterson or Tom Clancy, somebody, or like Michael Crichton, a really big sort of like airport thriller book guy. Like, that's kind of what I've surmised. So he has a bunch of really popular books. One that I think I'm going to read next is Malice, because it's available on Kindle Unlimited. And I will say this was really entertaining. Like, I really liked the writing in this one, and it kept me turning the pages. I think I was set up to expect there to be a twist, which I don't think there is. Like, that's the way this had been pitched to me before, of like, oh, but the twist. And I was like, it told us that. I felt like we could surmise, like we could read between the lines just in the setup of where it was going. So, I don't even want to tell you the setup. Just go into this one blind and maybe you'll enjoy it a little bit more than I did. And like, I would say I was not impressed by the twist. So, very entertained by this. Like, I was happily turning the pages, but I'm not sure, as a thriller where you want a big twist, I'm not sure that came together for me. But I'm gonna read Malice. I would like to, there's a few of his books that have been recommended, and of the authors I've looked up, he's one who has more things available in English than some of the others, so I think I will definitely read more. My next one is going to be Malice, like I said, because it's on Kindle Unlimited. And then the one I liked the least was Confessions by Kane Minato. This is one of the books in that mystery category, because it's sort of meant to be really horrific. And I would consider this to be more horror than mystery thriller. And I also think that there's a certain literary element to this. So if you're into the idea of horror that's like of a higher caliber in terms of its writing, I think if that's your expectation, you might get on with this a little bit better. Because basically we have the same story from a bunch of different people's perspectives, but you are kind of revisiting the same thing over and over again. And I think the first version of that, I would give like a 4.5 star. The first chapter I thought was really interesting. It does, I will say this deals with HIV and AIDS in a way that I personally have a problem with. Like, I don't think it's, I don't know. I think I see what it was going for, but I just think we're past, as a society, we may be past its treatment of that topic in this particular book. But aside from that, the first chapter I thought was like, ooh, this would be a really good horror short story. Once we got further in, I was less interested until the very end, like the last the epilogue. That I loved too. So like the first chapter and the epilogue I loved, everything else I was just sort of meh on. And like I said, I would pitch this more as horror, maybe like a thriller version of horror than I would a mystery thriller. So anyway, but I gave this 3 stars. I didn't hate anything I read. And I definitely have some different avenues to explore. Another thing that I really enjoyed about this was I am not somebody who's super familiar with the country of Japan. So I really enjoyed this as a process of learning a lot more about Japan, even just geographically. So these books that I picked happened to be spread out really pretty well across the country. So reading about different regions, different time periods. I think that the books I read were set from the 1930s to the 2000s. So like a good range of time, looking up different professions that got brought up or different things in architecture or whatever. Like I felt like I enjoyed learning about another culture through this experience, and has definitely made me more interested in reading more Japanese literature in general, because I feel like I've enjoyed what I've encountered so far. So I have a few books in translation from Japanese that are more literary, and I'm definitely more interested to read those now. So I enjoy just in general the kind of like seeing another part of the world via books. So that was exciting. And yeah, if I was gonna say like some overall themes I see in the books, on a negative side, I will say that, and some of this is that these are a little bit older books. So, caveat here, I think that in general, if I were reading books from, the 40s, the 80s, etc., I may find this in any kind of mystery thriller. But there's a lot of misogyny just in like the intrinsic setups of some of these stories that I was like, ooh, I don't love that. So I did see that as a theme. I think the metatextual awareness was a theme that I saw in a lot of these that I really, really connected with. That is something that I enjoy of books that are self-aware of their genre. I just think that that's really fun. So I enjoyed that as a theme across a lot of these books. I did enjoy that there was sort of like a variety of motivations of why people did different things, that kind of hit on a lot of the classic motivations for a mystery thriller. So that was fun to see a different, I don't want to get into the specifics, so I don't want to spoil things, but just a good range of reasons why people done it. I will say that there was maybe a disproportionate amount of revenge now that I'm thinking about it. Yeah, okay, maybe I'll walk that back a little bit. Now that I'm thinking about this, there's a lot of revenge in these, so maybe that is a theme. There's a lot of revenge kind of stories in here, but I think that that's a pretty common motive in general in mystery thriller, but the sample size I got, there was a lot of revenge. So yeah, I don't know. Anyway, all that to say, if you can't tell, I had a really good time learning more about this tradition of mystery novel. I am very excited that I have more books to read now on my TBR. Actually, maybe I should. You guys want to, maybe I'll grab the ones that I've picked up so far. So like I mentioned, I'm going to read Malice on Kindle Unlimited. I've got the Mill House Murders, which is the follow-up to the Decagon House Murders. This one says it's a locked room mystery. So I heard from a few people who mentioned that this one isn't the best in the series, but that they get better again after this one. I picked up 3 more from Seisei Yokomizo. This is from the 40s, so this is sort of like I guess these would be in the Orthodox school. And then I picked up the Tokyo Zodiac Murders from Soji Shimada. There you go. So those are the, I guess, 6 more books that I already have on my TBR. And then who would I recommend these to? Like the one that I like the best, and therefore the one I would most recommend, would be the Decagon House Murders. But if you're looking for something more horror, I would say Confessions. If you're looking for a page turner, I would say The Devotion of Suspect X. If you're looking for something more literary, the Aosawa Murders. And then if you're looking for just like puzzle mystery, good times, one from the Orthodox school, one from the New Orthodox school, you know, these would be the two I'd recommend for that. So anyway, I had a great time doing this. Definitely let me know if you have recommendations for more. I'm gonna say probably steering more towards the Orthodox or New Orthodox schools. If you have recommendations in that vein that are translated into English, I would definitely appreciate those. And yeah, let me know if you've read any of these, what you think about them. Let me know if there's another regional mystery tradition that you think that I would like based on what you know about what I enjoy. I definitely really enjoyed this as an experiment of learning about a new region, since I've failed so spectacularly to full-throatedly enjoy kind of Scandi mystery thriller no matter how hard I try. Is there another one I should be looking into? Definitely let me know that. And yeah, I think that will do it for this video. So if you enjoyed it, please like, subscribe, follow me on the social medias if you are so inclined. I have all that information listed in the description box below, and I think that will do it. I hope you are having an absolutely lovely day today, and I will just talk to you soon. Bye!